You're watching Global Trade This Week with Pete Mento and Doug Draper.
Hello and welcome to another edition of Global Trade This Week. My name is Doug Draper. I'm one of your co-hosts. I'm actually coming to you this week from a lake house in Wisconsin. I have a funny story to share about that, but I need to introduce my partner in crime, Mr. Pete Mento, who's a co-host of the show. Pete, what's going on, man? You 2 weeks in a row, you got a collared shirt on. So how's the new job?
It's great, but I am at the corporate headquarters, so I do have to dress like an adult when I come here, seeing as how I do have a rather adult job, just like you. But I do have to dress like an adult, just in case someone important comes by, So yeah. I do like the new Draper look. I love this. I love the whole. Is it rock chalk Jayhawk? Did I say it right?
Rock chalk Jayhawk, and I got my little guard shirt off, so when I'm on the lake, I can be responsible. Yeah, but hey, Global Trade This Week is an important show. It needs to be weekly, like the name, and so I'll peel off the lake, get this thing done, and go back and enjoy life. Here's the funny story, Pete, and we can jump into it. So, rural Wisconsin, right? It's just a whole nother world. So I'm driving yesterday. We just got in yesterday. And I make this left-hand turn kind of out in the middle of nowhere, small town. And there's a sign that's leaned up on this table in the front yard of this house. And it says local honey for sale. And it's in masonry jars. And there's a cash box on the table with a rock on top of it. So I was like, wow, I got to see what this is about. I pulled over to check it out. I opened up the cash box. Literally, there's cash in there so you can make your own change. And I'm like, first of all, that gives me such good, the world is not imploding. And it's just a little example that there's still good people out there in trustworthy areas of the country. But I'm like, only in the middle of Wisconsin can you have a lockbox of money with a rock on it and a table that says honey. And everything else. So anyway, I thought that was pretty cool.
Well, Doug, also, honey's not easy to get. So the fact they've got all that honey just hanging around, got your inventory out for any scumbag freight salesman like you to come steal.
I know. I was thinking that.
I'm a big believer in local honey. If you have allergies, you should put that in some tea. It really does help.
Yeah. And I heard that it truly needs to be hyper local within a couple of, 2 to 5 miles. That's where you want to pull the honey from those bees.
Doug, I think we've talked about this before. Don't get me started about bees. I am fascinated by them. So if you get me started talking about them, this will be a 2-hour podcast, and we don't want that.
Yeah. Well, the podcast is about global trade, transportation, and logistics. So let's get it started, my friend. I opened it up, so you get the first topic.
Well, I texted you guys this morning, and I told you we're going to have to talk more about yellow. We got into it last week. It was your topic, and that just sort of opened it up to a broader labor conversation. But I believe it's Jason O'Brien. Is that his name? The gentleman who represents the Teamsters. He is fascinating to follow on Twitter if you are not. And last week, the good people at Yellow just came out and said, because of the way that we did our integrations, we have some internal issues that are forcing us to restructure. It's going to take us a while, but we're not doing so well financially. And if you force us to work under these contracts, we may legitimately be in a position where we're not going to be able to operate anymore. And, you read that and you're like, that's pretty honest. Not a lot of publicly traded companies will come out and say that in public, And he sends out a tweet that basically says, that's not our problem. Like, you guys lost, was it $37 or so, $38 million in the last 2 years? That sounds like a Yellow problem. And then he puts a picture up of a gravestone with Yellow on it, their logo on it, buddy, with the years. And it's like, you figure your stuff out. You agreed to a contract with labor, figure it out. You're not going to continue to use us as a leverage point. And their attorney was also quoted. He had a great line. he said people have to stop looking at labor like a variable cost in logistics. And that has been stuck in my head since I read that article, Doug. He said, you look at fuel like it's a variable cost, but now you just know it goes up and down and you have to deal with it. Labor is the same way. Labor gets more expensive and less expensive. It's something you have to manage as a professional in this industry. I was like, wow, and you read those, but to the credit of Yellow, they're not taking the bait. As far as I can see, they're not coming back like, oh yeah, well, I'll tell you a thing. Like they're keeping it above board, but the labor disputes, UPS and Yellow, O'Brien's been saying in both of them, like I know it's awful, but boy, is it entertaining. His tweets are very, very entertaining. But Doug, I mean, we're in a situation now where you have a serious, major, very important company. I think there's only 3 that are still union. That's saying that we would rather our people have to go find other jobs than be paid less than we believe that they're worth. And that's a sign of how important labor has become. And sort of, I believe, and I could be very wrong about this, but I believe that we're seeing a systematic cultural shift in Americans' attitudes towards organized labor. I think more towards organized labor since the pandemic and, the way things have been going with the labor markets these last couple of years. So it just really got my attention, Doug. And, we touched on it last week, but do you think they would really go through with it? Do you think they would go through with letting the whole thing collapse rather than renegotiate?
I don't, you made a comment before the air, 22,000 employees.
Teamsters truckers.
Yeah. If I was one of those and I'm like, hey, I'm all for the team and but I still, like you said earlier, I have a mortgage to pay, my kids in football camp, my wife's in transition or whatever it may be. Have somebody control my destiny like that and take it to the nth degree and watch it go off a cliff, I'd be pretty pissed off. So that's just a big, big company. It's almost too big to fail. I don't know if that's the right term to use here, but holy cow, does he control a lot of people in his hands with flippant tweets like that, right? I don't know if flippant's the right word, but just off the cuff. So I don't know. It's an interesting scenario. And the one thing, Pete, that I noticed, I was looking back, it seems like Yellow has always been in trouble. I would like 2008, I think, or 2009, they were close to bankruptcy and they were on a thread and they kind of made that through. It just seems like Yellow has always had difficulty trying to get situated. And oh, by the way, you and I and the rest of the people listening here just gave them a $700 million loan from the government through the CARES Act back during COVID. And like, where did that go?
Yeah. It's
crazy.
It's just, and how many companies do we know of size that have not just been running around to shareholders like, look at all this money over the past couple of years, and now that was when the market was insane. So how are they going to get by now that the market has really started to take a drastic turn, Doug? This is just, it's incredible, but it's, you were saying, do you really trust your union that much? And I guess it's up to them to vote and make that decision. We've had this conversation before, as laborers, we are agreeing to take our precious time and use it towards shareholder value or ownership value. And you've got to determine what that value is. And if they're not willing to value it at a basis you think is valuable, you got to find someplace else to work. But collective bargaining makes it a lot more harder to do that as an individual, but it gives you a lot more strength when you do it as a group. So I'm going to do a trade school on Friday. I'm going to talk about this, Vancouver, UPS, all of it. It's Doug, it just seems like I can't remember labor having more of a disruptive input into our business than it has right now in our career. Yeah.
Well, you got parcel, LTL, and ocean freight. That's all being affected by that to some degree. So it's
it's crazy.
It's crazy. So my first topic is a little bit along those lines, and I'm sure you have been aware. Well, maybe not, but today and tomorrow is Prime Days, Amazon Prime Days, and so a couple things when I heard about that. First of all, first thing is my family's probably going to make some purchases in the next 48 hours, so I need to be aware of that. The second thing, the good news is UPS and and yellow, Prime days will have come and gone and packages been delivered, whether it's LTL or parcel, before any of the labor situations come to a head. So don't worry about it. Your packages will get delivered. It won't be problematic. So that's one thing that caught my attention. The other one is it's starting to pull in other retailers. I think Best Buy for the last couple of years has said, well, we're going to run a sale in concert, as well as Walmart and Target. So Amazon by itself has almost created a mid-year holiday by putting this out. I think years ago, correct me if I'm wrong, but whenever they really amped up their own delivery network, it was almost like a test run to prepare for Q4. So let's run a special sale in the middle of summer and see what we can come up with. So it's interesting that their directive has brought other retailers on. And then the third piece is everybody's kind of cleaning their closet out, right? Think of it as a yard sale, because although the purchase orders are smaller, I've seen that in my industry with inventory levels starting to decrease because the POs that are coming in for fourth quarter are smaller than they were during the COVID era. Is that people are like, we got to get this stuff out of here. We're going to fire sell this stuff. So it'll be interesting to see what the holiday peak looks like. Because if companies get rid of their inventories and the replenishment isn't quite as high, does that mean the sales in the holiday season aren't going to be as aggressive? So is this kind of the best last final to get really good deals for the rest of the year? So anyway, people are going to get rid of it, but there won't be won't be impacted with parcel or LTL on the strikes and the labor issues we've been talking about. But it's always nice to see Prime and how much they have shifted and controlled consumer buying habits, and how other companies respond and react, which is essentially just Me Too, right? So anyway, it'll be fun to see how Wednesday. Well, tomorrow's Wednesday, so Thursday there'll be all kinds of statistics about how much business they sold and the throughput. So that'll be interesting to see.
I love it. I as a spectator of American consumption, there are few things as exciting as these consumer holidays like Black Friday, or Way Day. That's what we had at Wayfair. Prime days here with Amazon. I think they're incredible. And the fact that it's become something that folks look forward to. It's like, well, I was thinking about buying that new big TV, but I think we can wait. I think we should probably wait till Prime days, because I'm sure we can get a hell of a deal. And they really do, like you said, they're cleaning out their inventory as much as they can to get to it. But I'm wondering is, it's going to happen every year. So I'm sure that there's some people a lot smarter than me that have done a lot of analysis to understand, how to set themselves up for that inventory moment and to buy to suit. That might have happened in the past, but given COVID, I'm sure a big part is, like you said, it's just trying to clear out what they've got and get ready for Christmas. So I'll be fascinated to see what those numbers are like, buddy. Really fascinating.
Yeah. You know what else is fascinating, Pete, is the segment of our show called Halftime. It's brought to you by, that's a pretty good segue, I have to admit. Brought to us by Cap Logistics. We were just talking to Keenan. He pushes the button and the levers, as I say. So it's always great to have those, and we appreciate their support. So caplogistics.com if you have questions on supply chain. So Pete, I like yours. We'll get y'all fired up, and then I'll do mine second. So let her rip on halftime.
Yeah, so a lot of stuff in the news these last couple of weeks about people just losing it. That's the only way I can put it, Doug. So there was the young woman who was on a plane and said, I have to get off because you can believe me or not believe me, but there's Puritans or old timey people out on that wing, and I can't be on this plane. And then there's this rash of people starting fights on planes and getting violent on planes. You've got people getting violent at airports. That's a problem. Then you've got these idiots that are throwing things at concerts now. And people like Adele are saying, go ahead, throw something at me. I will stop performing. See if I care. And, the road rage, folks starting fights at fast food restaurants. The hell is wrong with people, Doug? Mm-hmm. And I went down a rabbit hole this weekend looking at it because I was wondering what do people that sociologists say? And of course, they say COVID had a lot to do with this. People were lonely. They forgot how to act in public. To drinking, lots of recreational drug use, lots of stress. But they said they can't blame mental illness for all of it. They just can't. It just seems like a social contagion almost. And my Meemaw had a great way of putting it, man. It's, y'all got to act right. And that's just, that might be a little too Texan for some people, but it's like, did your parents raise you well enough to realize that they might not have the McRib tonight, so you might need to get a quarter pounder instead at the McDonald's rather than ripping stuff off of the counter and starting fights with people. And I worked in fast food when I was a teenager, and it was very boring. I probably would have welcomed an opportunity to throw down with some drunk people at 10 o'clock at night when I was a teenager. But Doug, what is going on with people that they're just freaking out all over the country, man?
Yeah, well, here's the good news. I was on a plane yesterday from Denver to Milwaukee. Everything was calm and cool. We were actually delayed, I don't know, an hour and a half. The crew was late and everything. So there was a little rumblings. But yesterday for my flight, it was pretty smooth sailing. But I don't know. I guess I'd say two things. Insert alcohol, and there's always problems. Yeah. And then number two, just the ability to get likes and shares and views, right? If you look like, I could go on right now to any one of the social medias and be able to pull up some freak out. It's even promoted. There's channels on Reddit and everything else, public freak out where you can just go and watch people lose it. So I think that has something to do with it. And, alcohol, and there's a camera everywhere you are. So it's getting captured more. But the craziness, like you said, throwing stuff on stage and hitting performers, it just seems like it's just, going to the nth degree.
Yeah, y'all got to act right. I'll just say it again. Y'all got to act right. You got to knock this off, because ultimately what's going to happen is you're not going to be able to see the people that you love performing. Is that what you want? Mm-hmm. And I'm that guy, man. I wish somebody would get up on my plane, Doug. Like I have been training for so long to choke somebody out. Please. Please get up. And like, who are these people with their cameras out? Put your camera down and do something.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm thinking. Yeah.
Oh man, like I'm telling you right now, if one of my boys is on the plane, be like, "You ready to go? You ready to go?" One of my sons or my rugby buddies be like, I would be. It would be like the prom and Prime Day all wrapped up into one for me, Doug. I'd be up in that aisle, just throwing haymakers and ground and pounding. I'd be so fired up. Yeah. So I wish somebody would on my flight. I took one this morning. Everybody was snoring. Not a problem. Yeah, I wish somebody would.
Nice. All right. Well, I'm going to jump into something that's made a little bit of news recently. The Northern Lights, I guess Aurora Borealis, more commonly referred to as Northern Lights, 17 states. I think it's Thursday. So 2 days from now is 17 states will be able to see it. So I was like, always heard of it, kind of know what it's about. So here's a logistician's perspective of it, right? I'm going to dumb it down. So the lights actually take place like 80 miles up into the atmosphere. But here's the basis is there is a storm, right? A solar storm that happens on the sun. Those particles give off, electrically charged particles, and then they collide with, the magnetic fields that in the Earth's atmosphere. The magnetic nature of it pulls it to the North and the South Pole, and then our atoms and molecules interact with their electrons and yada, yada, yada. You get some pretty cool lights. And so apparently there's a pretty large solar flare that's going to happen. So I'm excited for it. I'm kind of in the middle of nowhere in Wisconsin. I will be maybe on a lake. Maybe we'll get on the boat and go check it out in the middle of nowhere without any light distractions. But I don't know. I think it's pretty cool. I like to talk about it as far as on the show goes here and just really understand it. So I don't know. Have you ever seen the Northern Lights?
When I was a teenager shipping on the Great Lakes, I got to see them. They were beautiful. They really were. So I get it. It's all the things that we see in our regular interaction with the environment around us. You don't see the sky just start shimmering in all these different colors. And I saw them again in Alaska when I was a bit older. New Hampshire is one of those states where we're going to have pretty good visibility. And because we don't have as much light pollution up north, there's a lot of people from New England that are driving to Maine and New Hampshire to get a good look at it. And, pretty good explanation, Doug. All those semesters of meteorology, I forgot almost all of it, but I do remember that it's a magnetic storm essentially of those particles, like you said. And it really is, it's just beautiful. So there's somewhere out in Colorado, I don't know exactly where it is. I bet Keena knows. He's probably sitting there like, munching on his Kind bars right now, drinking his kombucha, like he's going to tell us where it is. But there's some place in America, like the best place in America to not have light pollution is somewhere in Colorado. And it's so good that without a microscope, you can see the Milky Way from the naked eye. So if you guys are in Colorado and you're going to have it, I mean, you're probably going to have some of the best viewing in the whole country to see it. You should absolutely get out there and check it out.
Yeah. I have no idea what you're talking about in Colorado, but it
really?
Probably exists. It exists.
Yeah. I saw a CBS This Morning show about it that really got deep on the fact that it's just so perfect. And like stargazers from all over the country come with their telescopes because they just get a much better view. So,
yeah. Interesting. It's probably the southwest part of Colorado on the border of Utah out there. But anyway, back to the show, my friend. Since Cap Logistics gave us that 5 minutes of banter, let's get back to global trade. So what's your topic number 2?
I had to write down some numbers here to make sure I got them right, Doug. But we're, according to a number of different global organizations, so the World Trade Organization, the World Bank, CSCMP, we believe that amongst those groups, our industry believes that the cost of transportation and global trade as a whole will be increasing around 4% or about $800 billion. And that will be due to the modernization of vessels to live up to the IMO, International Maritime Organization's requirements to be better on the environment. So to deal with their carbon emissions. And when all this came out, all the ocean carriers, we all signed on to these pledges. They said they'd make it happen. And now they're all very worried because they're doing all that they can to say, look how expensive this is going to be. It's going to increase all the costs of your freight. We're going to have less ships, just like COVID all over again, But they went out and they bought all these new vessels that did not have the necessary, not all of them. I can't say all of them. Many of the vessels that were purchased globally did not have the necessary technology to deal with the carbon emissions. So it's all these companies that wave the green flag all the time. If you're going to go out there and espouse that sort of mentality, you need to live it as well. And much like when we talked last week about the air carrier security changes, and I said no soup for you. I've got a similar attitude about these ocean carriers. You need to do this before it's 20 years from now and we're finally forcing you to do it. You promised you would. Step up, get it done.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's kind of out of sight, out of mind because you don't see the movement of the vessel. You see it on the horizon when it leaves the port, and you see it, backed up in LA Long Beach or Vancouver as it is right now. But one thing I didn't know, I've been in the industry for a long time. You always hear about bunker fuel, and doing some research. That's like the dregs. It's like the bottom of the barrel, crappy sludge. Fuel that's just dumping into these things, right? I'm just picturing a guy instead of shoveling coal, it's just drippy, thick sauce that they're putting in these vessels to make them go. So, I didn't, they're not pumping diesel, pulling up a boat side here at a lake. So it'll be interesting. I don't know if it's just a little bit of improvement. We'll check the boxes and the compliance that needs to be met, or if it's going to be major overhauls. I also heard that the technology to get it to, levels that's really going to be impactful just isn't quite there yet, right? So we're trying to hit these standards with technology that may not be able to get it there as efficiently or cost effective. So it's a big topic that doesn't make a lot of headlines until you wonder why the hell is this ocean freight rate just jumped $500 because of bunker fuel.
That bunker fuel, the smell of it, just remembering it right now, Doug, makes me a little sick to my stomach. And hey, I got no problem doing less than container loads on ocean clippers again. And sending us out there on wooden ships and letting the sea and the wind take us where we got to go. Ask me if I care, right? I'll go back out there. Just be waiting 2.5 months maybe for your stuff, but we'll see. Yeah, I've kind of had it with the this attitude that it's going to cost a lot of money. Well, we just got through that, didn't we? So I think if we're going to do this, let's do it. Let's just stop talking about it. Let's do it.
Yeah. Cool.
All right, buddy. Bring us home.
Yeah. So my final one is related to, I think, the third trip from politicians from America going over to China to have a meeting that doesn't really amount to anything. But Yellen's recent visit caught my attention specific to, maybe not a mic drop moment, but it's kind of coincidental when Yellen went over there to have her conversation that China essentially put restrictions on the world's access to gallium and germanium, which are precious metals. I think is what rare metals is what they are, and those items go into the manufacturing of batteries and a lot of EV kind of technologies. So it's like right before she shows up, here's a little zinger, just kind of poked you in the side. If you dive deeper in the story, yes, China has a lot of those, rare earth metals, but it's not that rare, and there's other countries out there that can produce it. And the amount that those metals require, the amount required in manufacturing is pretty minimal in the big picture. So is it impactful? Yes, but I think it's more politically impactful than actual impact. My personal opinion. I guess if you're somebody else making EVs or battery technology, maybe you have a different take on it. But my whole point in this one, Pete, is it seems pretty coincidental, or it's not coincidental that that came out just days before the latest meeting with China that amounted to nothing, with another political politician coming from the U.S. So I don't know. I think that this whole trade war is more passive aggressive than anything, right? You come out, you make nice, and then there's little zingers on both sides that go out. So passive aggressive trade war. So a PATR, I'm trying to think of an acronym, Pete, because I love those. PATW, trying to think how you would pronounce that. But I think that's the new term I'm going to reference when we talk about the trade war between the U.S. and China. PATWAR. There you go. That's what I'm going to call it.
Doug, there's actually already a name for it. It's called diplomacy. And diplomacy is sticky and ugly. And it's a dance, There's what we show everyone we're doing. There's what everyone believes is actually happening. And then there's what's going on behind the scenes to make it palatable for everyone's political outcomes. And yeah, this was clearly a don't forget what we can do sort of a moment. But we've been just as guilty as that in the U.S. as any other country. It has far sweeping global issues, though, Doug, that come from it. Like the United Kingdom, when they did Brexit, they made an agreement that it's some absurd number, like 54% of the EU value in EVs has to come from UK and EU production. Well, most of the cost of these EVs is the battery. So the inability to get these things is making it more and more expensive, more difficult to create them. And they may actually start losing jobs in the UK because they just can't live up to their expectations. And that's going to make it hard for these EVs to be compliant with the UK's requirements for value. So, they're playing around with it. But at the same time, you're right. There are American solutions that we are working on that should be able to overcome what China's doing. It's going to take a little while, and it's going to cost a little more. They just want to remind us, I just want to remind you I can do this if I want to. It's just another one of those reminders that they're not a paper tiger. If they want to, they can make life very, very difficult, even if it's the short term. And it's more than just an irritation or annoyance. They can actually make it pretty rough when it comes to these rare stuff. But you want to talk about a topic you and I could spend a whole hour on. This is a pretty ugly one on what the different countries could pull from one another if they wanted to make life difficult.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, the diplomacy of countries that have precious metals in the earth that are needed for battery production is going to be a topic I'm sure you and I will speak about multiple times in the future.
It's not going away, buddy. No, but
Yeah.
Ready for my transition, Doug? Speaking of going away, we appreciate all of you coming today, but it is time for us to go. We're on Global Trade This Week, brought to you by our great friends at Cap Logistics. Doug, as always, it's just been a pleasure. Chef's kiss. And, also thank you to Keenan back in the booth. Hopefully he's finished with his kombucha and he can do his 2 hours of sun worshiping yoga before he gets back to work. But we appreciate everything that Cap Logistics does for us. I appreciate all the hard work you do, Doug and Keenan. And all of us can't wait to see you again next week on another exciting edition of Global Trade This Week. We'll see you.
Awesome. See you guys.